All right, good morning. I have a special guest here with me at the moment. A little bunny rabbit. Super, super soft.
Yep.
Hello, little bunny rabbit. There we go. This is, how many bunnies do you have right now, Peter?
6.
6 little ones.
6 little ones and 3 big ones. And then my brother Eric has 1 big one who's going to have babies.
Are you talking bunny talk instead of people talk?
Yeah.
You're letting the accent of the bunny impact you? But yes, so this is, we are having, how old are they now? About a month old?
Mm-hmm.
So they're in the stage where they are having to be trained to be good pets. And so, yeah. Thank you for bringing your bunny to say hello.
Woohoo! Bye.
All right, that's awesome. So, this morning, yesterday I had the opportunity, and I'm drinking, I'll just tell you my coffee. I'm drinking some coffee from Storyville Coffee Shop in Seattle in my mug from out in the mountains here, Russell Gulch, the pottery shop out there. And so I was thinking this morning, I actually spent a little bit of time reading. Okay, so first of all, what happened was Stacy and I read a book together every night. We were reading The 24th of June by Grace S. Richmond. And so I would read a chapter or two every night. And then this past weekend, it was Saturday night, I think, we finished the story. We were all the way done with the story. And so I said, well, what shall we read next? And I asked Stacy if she would like to hear one of my Harold Bell Wright books. And so I thought we would read a Harold Bell Wright book. And I said, so we went through, I named several of them. She said, well, why don't we do The Winning of Barbara Worth? And so I said, okay, let's do The Winning of Barbara Worth. So I came downstairs and I walked right over there to that shelf, and I was expecting to find Harold Bell Wright, The Winning of Barbara Worth. I couldn't find it. I looked all over all of my shelves. I couldn't find the book. Then I went and looked on those shelves in that room and that room up. I looked everywhere, and we were ready to go to bed, and I couldn't find the book. But not only could I not find The Winning of Barbara Worth, I couldn't find any of my Harold Bell Wright books. I couldn't find any of my Ralph Connor books. There were, well, I found one of each over on the shelf behind me over here. But my books, a whole big shelf of books, were all missing. And so I started thinking back, and I thought, well, I haven't seen them since we moved into this house, I don't think. And so did I lose them somewhere? What happened to my books? And it was quite alarming, because these books are some pretty good friends of mine that I've had around for quite a while. And I want to be able to, I love them. I love reading them. And I couldn't believe it that I hadn't seen them for a year at least. And so Stacy helped me. We unloaded closets. By now, it's 10 o'clock at night. It's time to be in bed for us. And I'm looking. We dig through the closets. We look under every box. We're out in the garage. We look everywhere. And I'm just thinking, I lost my books. And then we walk up to the bedroom. And Stacy said, well, we could check underneath our bed. And so we start, and we on purpose have the high platform beds so that we can store plastic boxes of things in there so that we can, rotate winter clothes and things out. Well, all the way in the back corner up on the very top, there was a cardboard box. She said, there's a box over there. I'm not sure what's in there. And so I pulled out the box, and it was full of all my books. So I didn't lose them after all. For just a minute there, I was like, and this is how bad it gets. When I lose those books, I'm going back, well, who will help me move? Did they recently acquire some of these books? I'm getting very suspicious here of my friends, people that I trust to help me move. And I'm wondering, did they take my... No, nobody took my books. I still have all my books. But I had lost them for a year underneath my own bed. And so we got them out, and we started reading The Winning of Barbara Worth. But then as a result of that, I've been reviewing some of the other stories. And I'm intrigued by other people who think of the value of story as something that they can be that can impact people, because both Harold Bell Wright and Ralph Connor were men who I believe both had been ordained in the church and were pastors, and at one point decided they could have more impact on their culture by writing stories than by just being a pastor. And so here I find myself, I'm a pastor and a filmmaker. I like to tell stories, and I think the same thing. I think I can have a better impact on people if I go ahead and, what I have to say runs out after a while, but the stories, they live on for a long time. So as a result of that, I'm having Storyville coffee. I could be drinking Storyville. I could be drinking my Storyville coffee out of a Storyville mug, but I'm not. I wanted this story too. What I liked about this guy, he's in his 70s now up there making pottery still. And he told us that years ago, sometime back in the early 70s, he and his wife had moved out to Russell Gulch. He said, we moved out here on a shoestring budget, and then the shoestring broke. And somehow they survived and they managed it, and he's been making pottery up there in the hills. And I love going by the pottery shop and getting a few pieces of pottery. We have quite a few now. But so I'm thinking about story this morning, and I was just considering. Yesterday, I sat for a while with a man who had recently said goodbye to his wife. They'd known each other for 50 years, been married for 49. And one morning, around sunrise, as he was by his wife's bedside, he was holding her hand as she passed into eternity. And we just sat and talked for a while. This man who had a rich history with the woman that he loved, and now she's gone. And he's still here, and his heart has been deeply touched by many things. He loves God. He's passionate for God. And I was just so refreshed by my conversation with him and encouraged by him. 50 years of relationship, and then in the dawn of a morning, she slips away. And now he's waiting. But he's not just idly waiting, he's living here still, but expecting to see her sometime. That was my first conversation yesterday. Then later yesterday, I sat for quite a while with a young man who's not married, and we discussed a lot of things, but among them we were talking about the future and the girl, the specific girl that he's thinking about, and beginning to hope that potentially this will be the one. And I see here he is at this end, looking at the next 50 years. And I just was sitting here this morning thinking about the fact that one time, 50 years ago, there was this man and his young girl that he had met, this young man and a young girl, and they met. They started a relationship. And then a year or so later, they got married, and 49 years later, she passed on into eternity with him at her bedside. And now here I'm sitting with the young man talking, and he's on the other side of it. He's found a girl. And I wouldn't be surprised if within a year there was a wedding. But I don't know that. His eyes and his heart are full of hope, and he's organizing his life in such a way to be as successful as possible, to love God to serve God with his time and his money. And it's encouraging to me to think about this cycle of life, and to think that in one day God gave me this gift of being able to sit with two different men at two different ends of the spectrum. And then to consider for myself, I am married, I have 4 children and 4 sons, and there's been lots of times when I've thought about what happens in a catastrophe, because we had a time when Peter was 3 years old, I think, maybe 4. But we had several family members here. It was when we were living in the apartment, and we were going to go down to the park, to the Clear Creek Greenbelt, to go walking and stuff. And as they left the house and were walking out, he was so excited he just ran out into the street. And there was a car coming, and the car screeched to a halt just feet away. and little Peter was just frozen looking at the car. He realized his error too late and was standing there just frozen. The car came inching up, like within 2 feet or so of him, and stopped. And for one long moment, I was able to look down this path of what could have been. The grief that could have happened. A life could have been over just like that. But then we were given the gift of that life again and went on to the Clear Creek Greenbelt as if nothing had happened and went on with life. And so there's been plenty of times where I've had the opportunity to stop and think, what would happen if one of us went on? And then I've had friends, and about a year and a half ago now, when Pastor Roman Miller passed away, and then there's been other men in my life and other people in my life who, as they've passed on, they're in eternity. And my wife is still here. And so, thinking about this, I at first I wanted to just call this coffee time today, just call it Living in the Light of Eternity or something like that. But that was a little bit too big of a concept for me to fully tackle over a cup of coffee today. Wow, you have 4 daughters. Are your daughters all grown now, or are they still younger, Edwin? Because mine are 2, 4, 6, 8 right now. That's the ages of my sons. We have friends who had 4 daughters who were all about the ages of my boys. Not quite. But they just had a little baby boy. So we're thinking if they could have 4 girls first and then a baby boy, maybe we could have 4 boys and now a baby girl. So you can pray with us on that one. We would be delighted to have a little baby girl in our life. But we're also delighted with whatever the Lord gives us. So I don't want to make it sound like I only want a girl. I'm very grateful for whatever God gives us. But just thinking about it, just thinking about the wisps, or as somebody has said, the thin places. There's times when eternity seems closer to us than at other times. And there's in the love chapter, you're talking about what love is. Love is not puffed up. Love's not proud. It goes through all of these things, and it gets toward the end, and it says, "Oh wow, sorry, I'm being interrupted now. Edwin's children are 2 months, 3, 4, and 6. Wow, you have a blessing right there. That's awesome." Yeah, I love these years. By the way, these are the years when someone has famously said that these are the years when the days are long, but the years are short. And I fully see it because we have our boys, and it just seems, right now William is in this awesome stage of talking where he says so many things, and he talks so much, and he sings songs, and he just does so many. He's 2 years old. He's absolutely adorable. You can understand the things he says and thinking and doing, and you want to just follow him around with a video camera and film everything he's doing, but you can't, and so you just have to enjoy every moment of it. Now we have several bunnies. Step a little closer and talk like a man instead of a bunny.
One is the same tricolor is the name of this one.
So the
which
tricolor?
is the color of our dad.
Okay, so it's white, and then it has this, what do you call this? Orange and the blackish looking colors there. So it's
the blackish is opal.
Opal. Opal is the name for the black part.
We
Okay.
have the black and white ones.
And then these are just opal and white. Is that what you're supposed to call it?
Black and white.
Opal, black and white.
A tiny bit of orange.
So what's happening?
We found this one outside of the box.
Oh, he was outside of his little box?
Yeah.
Trying to go see what his mommy's doing. So our boys have to train these bunnies to be good pets, because here in the greater Denver area, when we sell the bunnies, they are for pets. People want pets. And so they work with the bunnies from the time they're tiny, so that they're used to being handled. And they make really good little pets for people. Some have them indoors, some have them... We raise ours just right outside in keep them warm in a little cage. But I never, as a child growing up in an Amish home, I didn't think of most animals as pets. I had a dog that I called a pet. And even our cats, they were working animals. We had cats outside, and we played with them, had fun with them, but we didn't think of them as pets. So it's been fun to see them specifically raising animals for pets. But now I completely forgot where I was in the story. I think it was, I've heard that, well, there were two things I was saying, two thoughts that were battling in my mind. I got interrupted twice. So, the first interruption, I was talking about the thin places. There's thin places where we feel closer to heaven, closer to eternity. There's just a reality about human existence that even if we say we don't believe in God, there's moments where we just have to realize that there's something else out there. And so you'll see this in pagan cultures, you'll see this in atheistic lives, you'll see it show up at unexpected times where there's just a recognition that there's something beyond. And for us as believers, we have this confidence and this hope that we will see again our Savior. We will see him face to face. And there's that, this is where I was going with the love chapter, is, it says toward the end that now we see through a glass dimly, but then face to face. And I think of that. I think of this older gentleman at his wife's bedside, holding her hand as she passes into eternity. And now there are days when, even though he has 50 years of memories of her, there's days when he is thinking, I can't remember that, and he has to go look at pictures and photos of her. But he has those, and it's a blessing. But there's coming a day when he'll see her again. But what's exciting to me about that, his testimony, is the fact that while he's looking forward to maybe seeing his wife again, he's really looking forward to seeing his Lord, to seeing Jesus. And it's going to be so different then. And so for me now, and for all of us, as we're looking at our life, there's people that have gone on before that sometimes they've left a lot of questions. I've been, as I mentioned last week, I've been grieving a lot because of the revelations that came out against Ravi Zacharias after he's dead. So now his wife and his children are missing him and grieving for him, and he's gone on, and then the evidence comes out. And if you haven't seen it, you can look at, I think it's rzim.org is the ministry website, and on there the board gives us a statement, and then they also released the report where the information was given. And so I've been thinking about that, and just the reality that sometimes when someone dies, we are left with only good memories and only good things. But then there's other instances. I think of the father who abuses his own children, and then when he dies, his children grieve the fact. They grieve the fact that their father is gone, but they also are grieving the fact that he wasn't the father he should have been. And so it's like double-edged grief, and it just hurts. And so it's interesting to think about that there is a potential that we have so many layers of grief, and we want, I as a believer, I've read in the scripture where Jesus talks about at the end, the servant who comes in and hears the words, well done, good and faithful servant. And I have said it, and I've heard many other believers say it. I want to hear Jesus say, well done, good and faithful servant. And when I say that, and when you say that, we mean something specific. In our minds, we're thinking something specific that would be well done. We're thinking, and what we're doing is we're taking what we expect from ourselves, what we believe God expects from us. And so, I remember years and years ago when we were in the Amish church, and I remember one night we were sitting this was still, I was 8 years old probably. And I was doing like what Peter does a lot. I was just sitting listening to the adults' conversation. And as I was sitting there listening, I heard there was another couple and my parents, and they were having this conversation. And they had started sharing different things about children that had almost died. And then one of the other mom said that when she was a child, she had almost choked. Like she had started choking on something, and at the last minute her parents had been able to get it out of her throat, and she had lived. And I'm thinking as a child, wow, that was close. She almost died. And then I was completely shocked by what she said next. She said, and I remember there were tears in her eyes and in her voice, as she said, if I would have only died then, I could have known that I was going to be in heaven. She said something to that effect. But now, and her voice kind of trailed off, now, and I didn't understand it at the time. I just remember being so shocked. And years later, when we were talking about some of these things, I finally brought it up when we talked it over with my mom. But the reality was that for this poor lady, she understood that God loved the children and that he would take them home in the age of innocence or whatever. But she didn't understand how much he loved the adults. And so she was thinking that God now, when she was a child, God would be like, oh, come on home. But now that when she was an adult, he would say, I need you to keep every single rule of the Amish church perfectly. And then you have a hope of making it home, but no guarantee. And this is what she was thinking. This was the community we were part of. There was no real hope offered to make it to heaven. And so as a result, this poor woman in her adult life, knowing full well that she wasn't always able to keep all of the rules and to measure up to what she thought she had to be, kept thinking, if I would have only died back then, that would have been better. And so that has haunted me at times to think about that, is how many people have a wrong picture, because what she didn't understand was the same God who loved the little child that she was, that same God loved her now and had sent his son already for her, and she could turn to him, confess her sins, and receive forgiveness, and receive that quiet confidence that she would be with him again one day. She would see him. She would see Jesus. And that's the confidence that we have, is the confidence I have. I have a hope and a confidence that I will see him, that I'll be with Jesus. And when I think of something like Ravi Zacharias, and when, with everything that happened there, I don't know, you can read about the details over on the website, rzim.org. And when I think about that, and I just think about the grief that's happening, like there's grief in my own heart, and I didn't even know the man personally. But I think of all the people, not just, not well-known people, but all the people all around here. Your city, my city, you can find homeless people, you can find rich people, you can find all kinds of families. And one thread you'll have in common is you'll find families that are estranged from themselves, where there's a mother who no longer talks to the father of her children. There is a son who has not talked to his mother in years. There's a sister who has disowned her family and doesn't interact with any of the rest of the children or her parents. There's all kinds of just heart-rending pain. And when you think about it, and then you think about eternity, when, as Paul said, we will know just as we are also known, there's something that kind of fades away, and our own relationships become a little petty here. And I know things hurt. When we are divided here, it hurts a lot. But there's coming a day when we will be put back together with Christ in a way that is so meaningful and so beautiful that it can overcome all of these hurts and pains. But it doesn't just do that. And this was where my wisps of eternity come in. There are times when we're here on earth and we look at another relationship, and maybe it's not that you're outright estranged, but I sometimes think, I'm married and I love my wife. But we do have our differences, we do have our squabbles, and if I only focused on the squabbles or the differences, then I could be like, wow, why did we ever get married? And I could go down this horrible path to convince myself that I would be better off without having Stacy in my life. I could even convince myself that it would be easier to not have my children, just let them come up some other way, and that I could selfishly go and do something else, pursue someone else, and just go look for pleasures. I could convince myself of this path if I didn't remember eternity, and that there's coming a day when I'll be standing before my King. And not only before my King, but I'm going to be standing, there's this whole host of witnesses that have gone on before, people who lived and died, people who were faithful to the end. And I want to be faithful to the end. And so, as I was thinking about just eternity a little bit, thinking about the hopes and dreams we have with relationships. I have several thoughts on this, and I wrote down notes for about 5 different coffee talks because I wanted to talk about different things. But what I really wanted to encourage myself in is that if I can look to eternity and see the cares of this world melt away and be like, wow, it will be worth it all when I stand in his presence, then I want a little wisp of that eternity to come and apply to my life right now. And I want to melt away some of the cares and concerns and problems and other things I have now and say, okay, if God can save me so that I can one day be with him in eternity, what could he save now? What could he redeem and transform in my life right now? And so it's things like this. When I think in this way, this is what causes me, on Valentine's Day, it was 10 years since I asked Stacy to marry me. So Valentine's Day in the morning, just like 10 years ago, I had gone and I got our little flask together and got some little bit of unleavened bread and some things together, and I served some communion to my beloved and I at sunrise on Valentine's Day, and we prayed together and we recommitted ourselves to each other, and I thanked her for saying yes 10 years ago, and she thanked me for asking her 10 years ago, and it was beautiful. But I do that purely because I'm reminded of eternity, and I also know the fickleness of my own heart. I could wander off, but I belong to Christ, and I am his. And one day I expect to see him and expect to see all this great host that's gone before me into eternity. And while I am not in the position right now where I have my wife who's gone on before me and I can think of that, I think of other friends who have. And I think of just that reality. Life is so fleeting, it's so short, that I really want to live it in the light of eternity. And maybe one day I'll talk more specifically about the light of eternity, but right now I thought it was good to just have the wisp of eternity. Having a little wisps coming in when I'm reminded of what's happening from God to us. He loves us and he cares for us. And everything that we're going through here, he uses to mold us and to create an expectancy in us and to prepare us for that day when we will be with him, and we will no longer be bound by the confines of time. We won't be growing older all the time like we are here. We won't be running out of time. We will have everything and we'll be with him. And I don't know what he will have us doing, but from what I've read in the Bible, I don't believe it will be boring, and I don't believe we'll run out of activity or things to do, and I don't think we'll run out of relationship. God loves relationship. So these are my thoughts today as I am just thinking about yesterday, sitting and talking. The older gentleman, the younger man, one after 50 years with his beloved, and the other one with a glint of hope in his eye that maybe this one is the one. He hopes it is, and for his sake I hope it is too. And I hope that 50 years or more will go by and that they can be together in eternity one day. I know that the Bible tells us in heaven there is no marriage or giving in marriage. But I do know that God loves the relationships, and so I believe in heaven there will be a continuation of recognition that will be so much deeper. And this is the thing that I keep thinking about. Every one of us has sin in our life that we have confessed and repented of, hopefully, but that we haven't always told everyone out in the world what we've done. On that day, all of those things might be made very clean and very bare where everyone can see, yep, that's what this person and that person did. But instead of being shocked and horrified, we will all be humbled by the fact that there's a God in heaven who sent his son Jesus, who loved us so much that in spite of the fact that we fell so far short and were so broken, he still loved us and redeemed us and brought us to himself and allows us to be with him. And so, I am grateful for a lot of relationships in my life where I'm able to fully and freely unburden my heart and my conscience, and when I find myself falling short, I can talk about it. I'm so grateful for that here now. It's like a touch of heaven on earth to be able to confess my sins and receive forgiveness now. But it's preparation for that day when I'll be with him. And I don't know if I'll hear, well done and good and faithful servant or not. I don't know what that's going to be like, and I don't know that I'll care what I will really care about at that point is that I'm with Him. So, hopefully this is encouraging for you. Think about eternity. Think about your loved ones. And let's go and love our wives, our spouses, our children now in preparation for eternity. And let's not wait until it's too late. Let's live every moment, and let's be open and honest with each other and not try to hide something. Let's be open, honest with God and with man, and let's prepare living in the light of eternity. So hopefully that's encouraging. I'll talk to you guys next week. I really appreciate everyone that takes the time to reach out and interact with me. It's a real blessing. So thank you. God bless you all. I'll see you next time.